And Chairman, you are all set.
Okay, good, good. And we'll call the Olivet Planning and Community Design Commission for December, what is today? December 16th to order. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please call the roll. Rob Jurgel, present. Carol Wagner. Present. Judy Rich here. Richard Broke.
Present.
Brian Lewis.
Present.
Daniel Rosenberg.
Present.
And Tim Spiegelglass.
Present.
Well, it's great to have a full house. I appreciate it, everybody, especially with these holiday seasons. Let it also be known that City Council Liaison, Councilmember Missy Waldman is in attendance, or she was. She'll be coming back shortly, but her coat's still here, so we know she's not leaving. As well as Olivet's Planning and Community Development Department's Director, Carlos Trejo, Dawn Doty, Senior Planner, and Bridget Walters, Administrative Assistant. I believe she's on via Zoom.
Yes, yes, she is.
Okay, good, good. Okay, Carlos, did I miss anybody?
I think we got everybody covered.
And just as a good quick reminder, make sure everybody turns their mics on. Sometimes I think we got the reverberation issue addressed. So try turning your mics on just to make sure you guys don't forget, before you talk. If we do start hearing some reverberation, then start kind of turning them off again. But I think we got that covered, but it's just as a good reminder. Okay. Let's go over the commission procedures. At the beginning of each meeting, we will have public comments that we will have. These are for items that are not related to anything on the agenda. So if you do have a comment that's related to anything on the agenda, we ask you wait for that time to occur or that agenda item to come up. With each agenda item, we'll have a report that's presented by members of staff, and then we'll have some discussions amongst the commission members. We'll also be bringing on the petitioner to kind of discuss any particular items or issues. And then we'll be asking for general comments related to that particular item on the agenda. We do ask everybody that when they come on, that they do state their name and address for the record. And as well as for any public comments, we do ask that to be limited to 3 minutes to respect, everybody's time, as well as making sure we can get all the opinions heard. Carlos, did I miss anything?
No, I think you got everything covered, Chairman. Thank you.
Good, good. The only thing else, well, if you do have a comment, there's usually a button down at the bottom where you can raise your hand. So make sure you click that as well when you're ready. Okay, so that being said, Carlos, do we have any general public comments?
So if anybody would like to speak in regards to a non-agenda item on any land use matter, if you can show your hand, and I will bring you up to a panelist so you can inform the commission. Again, these are items that are not on the agenda.
We'll
All
give
right,
it a-
Chairman, I don't see any hand, and I recognize most of the majority of the names for the agenda items. There's a couple that I don't pick up right away, but no hands are being shown.
Good, good, good. Okay, well, we'll move on. We'll move on to item number 4, which is consent business. And this is item A, which is 73 Stony Side Lane. Petition type is community design and concept stormwater management plan review for a new single-family residence. The petitioner is, that's going to be, I don't know if I can, this is going to be tough. Tarajan Bella Cantharesian. I apologize if I mispronounced that. I do try, but as an engineer, it's not my forte. So, all right, Carlos, do we have a staff report?
Yes, Chairman. So you have a petition for a new single-family home at 73 Stony Side. I'll go through the slight issues, the core things that we've discussed with the applicants, and you'll see again, I messed with the reports. So you have the application and the project report, information submitted by the subdivision, and then the actual staff report and analysis is to the back in there, and that's just to make sure that subdivision information got across to the commissioners. Items to discuss were the consistency with the subdivision approved plans. I do have the building plans you have before you are what was reviewed by the subdivision, and I've received a revised site plan today reflecting what the subdivision had reviewed on their own. So, and it was just a slight deviation regarding the footprint of the garage that I'll explain in a minute. The other issues that we had with the petition were regarding stormwater management, the sump pump and its discharge area, and the proximity of the detention pit and the driveway. And we'll go over those individually. Regarding the Chapter 425 guidelines, a majority of those items the staff found were consistent with the spirit and intent of the guidelines, including massing, roofs, garages, elevation articulation, materials, and tree preservation. This is a house design that we've seen different variations of in the past that the commission has approved in their motions. The materials are pretty reflective to those that have been encouraged by the commission in the use of masonry. Here's your site plan. And again, and here's a kind of a vicinity map kind of showing the location in there. And then, of course, the core issues were the consistency with the subdivision approval. Now, while at the end of the day, there was agreement amongst the subdivision and the petitioner in what their findings were, and everything was addressed. But I didn't get the thing till like the week before, and then picked up there was a discrepancy. Had to go back with both parties, and everybody was happy in the end. But it puts a lot of that on staff to try to recognize. And I did have a discussion with the petitioner, who's the architect, saying we need to do a better job next time, and I have full faith that they will in there. So that issue regarding the subdivision and that engagement has taken place, and I think it's been satisfied.
And that was related to the garage?
That is correct.
Okay, okay.
Now, this Heather Hill Addition subdivision has some unique subdivision criteria that go above and beyond what the city's code regulations do. Now, the city and the commission is only limited to enforce its rules and regulations. And the way we measure a building height is up to 35 feet measured from the street line. And it doesn't matter how many stories you fit in that 35 feet, you just can't exceed that. This subdivision has a maximum height of 25 feet. And I don't have the authority to enforce that 25 feet. This subdivision has been very proactive and has worked with developers in the past, and they maintain this 25-foot height. So this or that height below what the cap is for the city of Olivet. So when we do that review, we make sure that the subdivision first engages with the developer on that height, because we can't enforce the 25 feet because it's more stringent than what we allow in there. So that issue has been resolved amongst the developer and the petitioner. Sure.
Question, I'm sorry. Clarification. So where is that? You said it's 25 feet from the street or 35 feet from the street?
They measure from, I think, from the top of foundation or the foundation area.
Okay, and then where on the street is it?
We do, when we measure from the lowest existing grade along the street side building elevation. So I'm sorry.
Okay, perfect.
So along the gutter line.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the lowest part of that street is going downhill.
Yeah, well, we'll take the average of the two extremes. I'm sorry. So I'll take usually the average. If it's an incline lock, which most of them will be, I'll take this two extremes, the existing grades, and average them out.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. That's a good question. Well, one of the things that, because they maintain a lower building height, what I've kind of seen happen within the subdivision is the footprint has widened. So they're filling in the same type of house square footage that we traditionally see anywhere else, but within the subdivision, because of that height, it seems like because they're pressing in that height down, that the house is kind of the footprint of the house gets a little bit wider. Now, again, they're really good in terms of minimizing the size of garages and all that, but that's been one of the things that I've seen happen over the subdivision. As that has happened, my setbacks and the extremities of the house get closer to the setbacks, and I lose more and more green space in there. And that's just a result. I mean, I like their regulations. They enforce the regulations. and we can have similar regulations that have, cause an adverse impact in something else. So that I've noticed that within these houses, the footprints are getting bigger. And as people do improvements, I lose more and more green space, or that the topography changes because of the disruption. Things start getting flat, and what was a nice supple incline that was 10%, all of a sudden becomes 25% because there's less space between the property line and the new footprint or so. And that's what we kind of took a closer look when doing the review of this. So the issues that we've discussed are, there's an increase in impervious area, and that increase in impervious area is really pushing the topography in that backyard to the extremities to the rear. And while that's okay, they're showing that they can create swells and reroute water. We start getting more concentration. More concentration leads to more velocity. More velocity leads to erosion. And what we want them to try to address, and we're glad to work with them administratively, should the commission take action on this petition tonight, is they need to start including some additional BMPs and where the swell sections, and you can see the defined ones that they have here, start to narrow down, because that's where the water is starting to get picked up. And then that starts where it starts to pick up velocity. And then it starts leading to erosion or coming down to a neighbor's lot faster than what they had seen before. It's going to be the same amount of water, but now it's in a more concentrated area and it's at a greater volume. So what we'd like to encourage them to put some additional BMPs, which are best management practices that deal with addressing stormwater or their mitigation techniques in there that provide some absorption and also provide some blockage to break down that velocity, to slow that water down. And that's what you see here in these two red areas. The other thing we noticed, they were adding the pool, and the pool structure itself, if this was an existing house and they were coming in for a pool, that pool would require its own BMPs for detention. So in this case, they need to provide detention area for that pool beyond just landscaping. And that was one of the things we noticed. The building plans showed that they had landscaped area around the pool, but the survey plans didn't. And if you take a close look, there's no way that the building plans can reflect the survey plans, because their landscape would impede into the swell areas, and that just doesn't work. So there are little things that we have, thanks to Don, we got more time to spend and look for these things that she's taking care of, other planning items and things like that. So that helps quite a bit. The other thing that we notice is, okay, so in this subdivision, we've had an issue, and I couldn't tell you specifically what it is, but these 24/7 sump pumps, and that they're pumping water and they're pumping it into the street curb because it starts flooding their yards. And then our street curbs start getting water even through hot summer days. And then of course, during winter, those become ice sheets along the curb. So we need to do a better job in addressing where sump pump discharges occur, trying to determine, whether this sump pump is going to be continuously running, or there is no low. I would assume that the sump pump is a reflection of a low water table or something like that. So we need to know that, and we need to make sure that they direct it, either if they direct it to the street, that they put it in some absorption area, or that they direct that to the back of the yard. But then again, I start increasing concentration, which leads to velocity, which leads to erosion. So that it needs to be discharged into some type of absorption, some BMP that provides some absorption and some filtration, or to slow down the speed of water. So again, these are little things that in the past we just, we try to take care of, but we want to make sure we start addressing these early. And then finally is the pit and the driveway, the stormwater pit and the driveway, and you'll see it here. That's a lot of footprint going into one pit. And I think we should start looking at trying to separate these pits to a front yard and a rear yard, as opposed to putting it all in one basket, lack of a better word in there. But the other thing we noticed, and Jonathan was really good at this, is that there should be a buffer distance between a pit and any other gravel filled area. That water within these pits tends to find its way through any crevice and crack. And when it's put up against some type of fill, whether it's a patio, a footing, a foundation, or so,
Trench.
that water eventually is going to start seeping through that rock area that was supporting something else. In this case, I have a driveway that overlaps the sump pit, in there, and I have a concern that that's just going to lead to a water dispersion issue. Now, this is not my design. I'm not an engineer, and if they're willing to take, the responsibility for that, and say that this works, I'm fine with that. But based on past practices, this has not been a good design to have an overlap between a pit and some rock compressed area.
Carlos, when you, just to get your terminology straight, when you say pit, do you mean the reservoir tanks?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Mhm.
Just wanted
Because
to
those reserve things include not just the flow wells, but there's rock all the way around it. Those flow wells are just an area where it's an open jar or container to hold water, but then it releases into the rest of the pit, which is crushed rock.
Okay,
And that takes up a lot more of that absorption. So that becomes like the bread around the jar.
okay.
And it
So you're
starts
talking
to-
about the whole thing.
Mhm.
If the top of the reservoir pit is deeper than the gravel base of the driveway, will it still impact that?
Well, that becomes it becomes a question beyond my professional expertise. Again, I think that surveyor needs to own up to, the engineer needs to inform us and make sure that if that is the fact, that we have something to ensure that the city's covered if this issue does happen.
Quick question, Carlos. My recollection, vague as it is that some time ago, we discussed the possibility of having someone that would represent Olivet's interests
Mhm.
with each of these plans. So in addition to the engineer who designed it for the home builder or the owner, that we would have someone assess these things independently to make sure that it's done to a standard that we accept. Because I think, I'll speak for myself, maybe for the group, I don't know that any of us is qualified to assess these kinds of things. And it seems like it'd be a good idea to have someone to counsel us on these issues. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I have no problem. I think we'd have to expand the service agreement. The current review process that we have is our person kind of looks at the grades and the calculations to make sure that they're correct. And in this case, there's no question in terms of those issues, but based on the other best management aspects of this, just things that we've seen. And I think, we would welcome an outside resource
And we could
to
add,
take a look at it.
okay, I'm assuming we could add some small amount to the fee that people pay to offset that additional work. I feel personally a little bit ill-prepared to assess this, right? I mean, you're expressing some concerns, which may be very legitimate. But we have no way, I don't think we're qualified to assess whether we should approve it or not. Given those concerns,
Understand.
who are we to make that decision without some counsel from someone that really knows this stuff?
A good point. And there's two ways that we can do this. One is, again, given the concerns brought forward, that those items be addressed by an outside consultant on our behalf, or if the commission wants to hold or table on this till they're addressed, that's the other extreme.
Jim,
Go ahead.
I'm curious, you mentioned, it's not an area you're an expert in as well, and I echo your thoughts. You mentioned though that if the engineer was willing to accept it, it's on them. I guess what would be the repercussion if we approve this, it goes forward, and we find that the water, it wasn't, enough?
Yeah.
What would happen?
One is in a process like this to make sure it's reflective in the meeting and in the meeting minutes, that concern's being expressed. And again, when we go through the permitting, to make sure that the engineer is pointed out to the engineer, what we're trying to do is make sure, like, we brought it up, to the best that we can. And that's all, for the most part, that's within the frame that we can do so right now. And even if we had another engineer take a look at that, you know,
Can't we just make sure that that gets addressed? Those issues get addressed by their own engineer?
that's the goal in here. Now, I like in terms of what Commissioner Brophy had indicated, to get some assistance from an outside group that we're asking the right question and that we're looking at the right possibility, because in no way, even with an engineer's review, do we want the city to take responsibility of the designer.
Right, and my understanding, you can correct me on this, my understanding is if this gets built, to your question, if this gets built and there's a problem, and let's say there's runoff that's causing flooding in someone else's basement, or they've got some cesspool sitting in their backyard because of all this runoff, that then becomes an issue between those two homeowners. And-
And that's my question is, thinking back to Arbor Road or things like that, is what's the outcome?
I think that's the outcome. And so I feel to some extent like it's our responsibility as representatives of the community to try to stop that from happening.
But we're not design reviewers. You know, we're not reviewing how they designed it. We just need to make sure that they have all these items included that match our, you know, our regulations and guidelines. Carol?
But an engineer will seal it and say that so it becomes their liability, not ours. And I agree with you, Richard, in that I don't feel that any one of us, or staff really, is an expert and can really assess what we're told and what the options are, and make sure that we are indeed asking the right questions. And I would feel much more comfortable about us voting on this after these kinds of things are resolved, not voting on it and then hope for the best. I really think that I know it helps hold people's feet to the fire when we withhold our judgment. And I would really like to see us do that in this case and just defer voting on it.
The only thing I'll caution everybody on is we're not reviewing like the structural design, you know, things like that. We just make sure that they have a structural engineer that's involved that signs it and stamps it, you know, but we're not going through the details. And I feel like that's what a little bit of this is going through those details. I think it's appropriate for us to point out the concerns, try to make sure that they've addressed it, you know, and make sure that it's reasonable. I do believe staff, you know, can work with the developer there. But I do think what we need the consultant to be around is to help us guide us on what best practices we need to make sure we implement, what we need to be asking for, and what maybe we need to change our own regulations and guidelines for.
And that's, yeah, that's, I guess what I'm grappling with is either this is within our purview and our responsibility to assess, or it isn't. And if it isn't, I don't think we should waste time talking about it. If it is, then I don't think we're qualified to perform the assessment. So it seems like, I agree with you, you know, the structural engineers, they sign it, say this is how it's going to be built. If the house falls down, that's their problem.
Right.
The water issues, I think, are a little different because it leaks into the community's property, either the streets, as Carlos said, or neighbor houses. So I don't know, and maybe Carlos, you can shed some light on this, the degree to which we have the authority or the responsibility to assess the water management plan as part of this process.
I look at it as part of, like, for me, it serves as a sounding board, that these are issues that I feel are important to be addressed, to bring them to you. And through your actions, I'm in a better position to ensure that they are addressed.
So I'll just say this one last thing, I'll be quiet. I get that, but I don't think that we are qualified to be that sounding board. I think all we can hear is that you're concerned and say, well, then we should get somebody qualified involved to assess it. It just seems like an exercise in futility to ask us these questions because we can't give you the qualified answer. Yeah.
Well,
That's my view.
how about we just say that this needs to be, you know, resolved with our representative as well as theirs.
Right, agreed.
Yeah, I think so too. I would just like to see us delay voting on it until it is resolved. However, it gets resolved, just because I know from experience, as well as professionally working here, that it helps hold the parties involved accountable if we wait to vote. And it encourages them to act and take care of it, however they do that. And I think that this is a case where I'd like to see that happen.
And I'm not disagreeing, I guess to understand though, based on what Carlos said, my thought was that even if we voted on and approved it and we called out in a condition that they work with their engineer to make sure this is addressed, whether we delay and do it or vote on it and go forward, that's the resolution of this. We're basically calling it out just to make sure it gets addressed, right? Correct.
Right.
But
I
even
don't-
if,
I'm not-
even if their engineer addresses it now, comes back and tells us next time, same thing, we're good. Did that change anything, I guess? We don't know anymore.
We don't know, but I think we have to try. I mean, I don't, I can tell you that if we don't, I mean, we may, it's setting our community up for other issues. And if we have an opportunity to make something as right as we can, then we have an obligation to do so. At least that's the way I would look at it. And I don't see any reason to vote on this tonight and rush it through when we could hold it for a couple of weeks and get a better result.
Carlos, do we know what kind of time constraints they are on this?
I know
think-
it is an owner built, as a matter of fact, they're relocated in the community as they're preparing to develop this house. So in terms of, this weather, this winter so far, at least this, as we get pre-winter, has been strange. So that we do have a lot of people trying to actively get permits and foundations in before we get into that coast belt. There's no way this one would make it unless we continue the strange weather through January.
Right.
So I don't see it as a permitting issue or something that needs to be expedited. The other thing, again, I think that the community design portion outside of the references to the site plan and grading, which are handled under that chapter 422. This has been a traditional house. It's received the support of the commission in the past, meets the material standards. We can facilitate them through, again, based on Mr. Martin's conversations, we can approve the community design review to allow them to start reviewing the building plan set while they resolve these site plan issues.
I think that's a pretty good compromise right there. Do we have, well, let me ask a question. Do we have the petitioner on?
Yes, there.
Then maybe they can address some of those issues.
Okay.
So let's just say, but I wouldn't be opposed to that.
What was that?
I would feel that Carlos is that we would do that, and then Carlos could have somebody that they could rely on and do it administrative and call an engineer and say, hey, I'm not sure if this is correct. Can you give me some outside guidance on it?
Right.
And I don't think that should come through the board and we should be asking that question. I think these guys should be asking that question on that thing. And I mean, I don't see anything wrong with the house. I don't see anything wrong. It's just the issue of the something, is that the right thing for them to
Right.
do? And I
Yes.
think if they had a resource for them to call and say, hey, that's okay, that's two engineers saying, hey, this is good. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's enough for me to hear that. So that's my opinion on it.
Let's hear from the petitioner
Yeah,
first, and then
absolutely.
we can have some further discussion, about this.
Bear with me 1 second, Chair.
No problem.
Mr. Balakati Thirizan, I am going to promote you to a panelist.
There's also a hand raised.
All right, and then the architect, your architect is also in attendance. So I'm also gonna, Mr. Ivanchuk, I'm also gonna promote you to a panelist.
Good.
At least those are the two I recognize for this petition. So I should have Mr. Ivanchuk. And Mr. Balakati Thirizan. And then if you can both state your name and address, and also we would appreciate if you can have your video component on during the discussion.
And Mr. Ivanchuk, you are muted, just so you know.
Thank you. Pavel Ivanchuk, 101 South Brent Avenue.
Thank you. Appreciate you being on board. Carlos, are we getting the
Yeah,
owner?
Yeah. Mr. Balancathiru-san, I have you transferred over, but you're still muted and your video is still off.
Yeah.
Now, you're there now.
Yeah, I just joined. Thanks for inviting.
Okay, sir, thanks for being on. Can you please state your name and address for the record too?
Sure. Name is Nadarajan Balakadresan, address number 4, Nassau Drive, St. Louis 63124.
Thank you. So you've heard some of the questions or discussions that we've had, amongst the commission members. Have you guys had any time or any thoughts on that or had any previous discussions on those issues?
I did. I spoke, well, my correspondence with the civil engineer regarding the pop-up. He would like to route it to, I'm sorry, regarding the sump pump discharge. He would like to route it to a pop-up on the yard. That's one. Regarding the location of the pit in the driveway, I think it's a good idea to move it away from that. And I think it looks like there's space to do that.
So Carlos, would those things address the concerns that you have, or are there other issues?
That concerns just one of those components. So where is that sump pump discharge going? The one thing that I don't know about that sump pump is what is going to be the volume of water that's going to be coming out. Regardless of what direction it goes, is that there has been a history within this subdivision that some of these pumps are run consistently. And if that is true with this, then I need to be able to store it within this site and mitigate its as it disperses into the natural flow of the topography in there. So,
I don't think there's a way to know how much is going to be coming out.
and that's where it becomes really confusing. And I agree. We have not found the magic. We work with some developers that they kind of give us a heads up, like once they get their footing and foundation in place, because they say that's when the sump pump comes in there, and then they have a better idea of what that volume is. And we worked with them about trying to create, an amenable place so some of that water could be placed out there. The most common practice right now is to run it to the street. And what we've been doing, and I think if you drive around town, you've seen where you see some of these little rock beds right around the street curb, because our code requires that discharge pump, the point of discharge of the pipe for the pump has to be set back 10 feet from the property line. So usually the curb is another 5 to 10 feet. So you'll see this rock bed that runs from the curb about 15 feet into a property. And that's usually where the sump pump discharge is. But all that does is break up some of the velocity. It does help take some of it in, but you'll see a wet curb, after a rainy, couple of days after a rainy day. Or so.
Alright.
But yeah, that's been difficult. And all we can figure out is that because of some of these foundations, as you go from what was a 7-foot foundation on an old home or so, and you put these new 8, 9, or 10-foot foundations, that's pressing, what we think is a water table and recreating that pressure.
That's not unique to this house though, right? I mean, this is more of an endemic problem.
Yes, yes, it's not, and we don't know on this house yet in there, but that's why we would like the flexibility to kind of see if in theory it does work, that we kind of know how active the sump pump is once the footing and foundation is in place. Then we can work with them to determine what type, if they need a pit, if they need a rain garden, or that it's dry enough that it can just release that grade.
Carlos, isn't this the subdivision? I remember that had no basements originally, every home in this. area
there-
did not have a basement.
I'm not really sure. I couldn't answer that.
Okay, that's what I'm remembering about the history of this subdivision. If anyone's gone in and done it. You worked there.
I know a lot
Until
of
the new ones, they didn't have basements. They hooked on,
Slab on grade.
foundation.
Well, have you spoken to them about all the conditions?
Yeah, they've all got copies of the report. I know that there's been exchanges with the engineer surveyor, but we haven't talked about what possible scenarios there are. In it.
So, Mr. Ivanchek, have you guys, had any thoughts or ideas about what kind of BMPs and items and issues related to that discharge point?
If so, it sounds to me there could be the most, if it's a low flow situation, then a discharge to a pop-up is one approach. But if we find out that there's gonna be more water than we would like, then I get then we would be okay with routing into pit.
The only problem with that, it takes up the volume of if we route it to the stormwater detention basin,
Mhm.
that takes up volume of that detention basin that we won't have with the storms.
That is correct. That one of the things that we won't allow is for the sump pump to be routed into the pit. The pit specifically calculated for the roof area, not calculated for the excess water that would be created by the sump pump. Now, again, that could be a minimal amount of water, or that could be a lot of water. We don't know, and we don't want to have to oversize a pit based on an unknown in there. So we tend to keep the sump pump away from the pit. Now, others have created a separate independent pit for the pump. As opposed, so they could determine or size it to whatever that need is and not disrupt calculations to the bigger pit.
I think would be flexible to, I mean, if that's to be understood, if the pit needs to be increased or another pit to be added based on the flow that we'll find out we'll need, that should be, we should be able to provide that.
Where on the drawings is the pop-up or, going to be or anticipated being?
I can point to it if it's to the circle where in the center of the screen, a little squiggly arrow at the tip of the arrow would be, yep. That's what would be, and yeah, and the sump pump is where the circle is.
Okay, good. The pool's in the back, right. Okay, and so you'd be amenable to moving that detention basin away from that driveway to address those concerns that Carlos noted.
Correct.
Okay, good. Any other questions or comments among the board members? Carlos, do we have any public comments related to this?
One second, Chairman. Is there anybody in the attendance that would like to speak in regards to this petition at 73 Stony Side Lane? Okay, Chairman, I see none. I recognize most of the audience and those that are speaking in regards to the other petitions. There's a couple of names I don't recognize, but none of them have identified that they wanted to speak.
Okay, right now, I personally feel like we can probably keep these grouped together. I believe he's addressed that, but I want to make sure that that gets added to any motion. Does anybody still have a concern and wants to keep it separate?
Yeah, well, I have kind of mixed emotions on this one. I think the developers indicated a great willingness to work with staff, and I think that's terrific. But that makes me want to approve it, but at the same time, I still have a lot of concerns. And
What are the concerns?
well, it's just a lot of questions to me about the stormwater that I guess at this point, I'm not even sure that we've asked all the correct questions.
Do you have any additional questions?
Do I? No, but I am certainly not an expert
Right.
in stormwater. So I guess I'm feeling a little uncertain.
Okay.
And I could be convinced, but I'm
Well,
not
I
sure
believe,
at this point how.
I believe the concerns that Carlos was bringing up, the one with the being too close to the other foundations, as long as we have a good distance away and a separation, that should address that. And Carlos, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think if they had a distance of at least 50 feet or more, and that there was no crossing in terms of when those things are excavated, that there should be enough buffer in between.
How
the
much
two.
space did you say?
At least 5 feet.
5 feet. I thought you
5
said 50. and I
Me
just
No,
too.
was
no,
like,
sorry.
There's
At
not
minimum, it would
enough
be 5.
space.
The rule of thumb is to keep it about 10 feet, but I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
see how they
Yeah.
can do 10 feet here.
Okay, so I guess I'd like to ask the developer, is that if we moved it that much, would he be okay with that?
Well, Chairman, and what I would recommend to address Commissioner Wagner's concerns, and I think which are valid, is again, the community design component, I think is pretty well set.
Right.
And that they come back with a revised site plan. That gives them the ability that if they're prepared to apply for permits, we can assist them in starting the review. If they're not set yet, then no time is lost. The site plan is the only thing that's probably going to change on this. And again, I
So you
usually-
prefer to have it separated so we can get the revised?
yeah, I
drawing?
would be comfortable if the commission is said, and this kind of helps facilitate them in the process. Again, when these items are addressed, all that would happen is that I would bring this petition back, or these items were addressed upfront. I wouldn't seek the guidance of the commission. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just didn't know how to say it. What these are is like, hey, in my analysis on your behalf, I'm concerned about these things. And I want to I look for you to say, yeah, these are valid issues, not necessarily for you in terms of how to resolve it or how to design it. That's their role. With your support on bringing these issues to you, then it helps me in terms of saying, no, you got to resolve this. I even took it to the commission and they concurred. It's not just me and the engineer, it's the commission, me and the engineer, so. And that's the way I looked at the process, and it might be a discussion we have in one of our next work sessions. And because I understand all the different sides, and I think there's good questions about it, but that's the way I kind of look at it. You rely on me to identify code compliance and planning and zoning issues on those type of land use matters. And I rely on you to confirm that, or bring things that I may have not seen or disagree with things that I've seen, and that I then go back and have them resolve it or design it, and then things move on. So, and that might not be the right way. I'm open to having that discussion in that process.
I think we're all fine if we want to go ahead and separate it, get that plan revised. I'm okay with that if that's what you prefer. I just thought we might be able to move this along, and keep things moving as long as we had assurances that everything was going to get resolved. So,
I'd
So-
be fine if we want to separate it.
so that being said, do I hear a motion?
I'll move, Mr. Chairman, to approve the petition for community design only for a new single-family home at number 73 Stony Side Lane, as presented in the memorandum from the Department of Planning and Community Development dated December 16th, 2021, subject to any staff conditions noted therein.
Are there any comment, or do I hear a second?
Chairman, I'll second.
Motion's been made by Richard Brophy and seconded by Carol Wagner. Any further discussion? Carlos, you please call the vote.
Bear with me 1 second. Commissioner Spiegelglass,
Approved.
Commissioner Rosenberg, Commissioner Lewis,
Approved.
Commissioner Brophy,
Approved.
Commissioner Rich,
Approved.
Commissioner Wagner,
Approved.
Chairman Dragell.
Approved.
The motion to pass the community design review only is unanimous, 7-0. The site plan review is being deferred.
Yes, as long as it doesn't interfere with anything,
Okay.
and the petitioner knows what we're going to need, what we'd like to see. Mr. Ivanchuk, did you understand kind of what we're looking for that?
I do understand. And my question is, are we saying that we're gonna have to resubmit the site plan for the next meeting in January?
That is correct, addressing the issues that are noted within the staff report. Now, the next scheduled meeting is January 6th. I believe is January 6th.
And quick question is, if we have to, for building permit application, the site plan would have to be integrated into that? Or actually, no, it doesn't, right? Because it's separate.
Correct. We can do a human foundation review for on your behalf.
Yep. Okay.
But at some point, we can't let the site plan lag too long.
No, I understand that.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate being online, and I don't see the property owner, but we appreciate you coming online as well.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Chairman, if you can bear with me, I'm going to do the transfers and then.
Sounds good.
Right, Chairman.
Okay, we'll move on to item B, which is 4 Arbor Road. Petition type is a community design and concept stormwater plan management or stormwater management plan review for a new single-family home. Petitioner is Mark Manlin. Property owner is the May Family Trust. Carlos?
Chairman, we received a petition for the construction of a new single-family home at 4 Arbor Road. That's the second house to the end, actually the third house to the end of Arbor Road as it terminates towards the south end of the community. There's an existing home that would be torn down, a new home be built. The access to the road is often it is an active easement. It's a private road that sits on a 20-foot easement in there. It's a pretty narrow road. It doesn't conform with the city's standards, and it's mostly an asphalt road with minimal curbing, if there is any. In review of the petition application, your report kind of notes the 3 items that staff is bringing for discussion. One is the subdivision approval. Again, based on trustee information, it looks like the items have been addressed. The subdivision was encouraging the applicant to add additional brick on the side elevations. That is not a city requirement. The only thing that we look at is whether there's 50% masonry in the front. And if there's not, we bring it to your attention. There is well over 50% masonry on the front, and there's a mixture of masonry and siding on the side. The subdivision wants to have full masonry on the sides. That would be between them and the owners. We would support, whichever route that they go in the permitting process in there. The other thing staff noted is the southern edge of that driveway turnaround. And it's a concern more about the slope and that surface runoff of water, and it would go directly to the neighbor's driveway. And if they can place a lip or some type of thing that would detour it towards the street, that would help ensure that there's no erosion being caused in there. The natural flow of water right now is just as the surface flow runoff is happening. The thing is, there's not a driveway there that speeds it. It's going through grass now. It's going to go through a hard surface. So there's going to be some velocity, and then velocity essentially leads to erosion. So talking with the developer contractor, they're looking to take a look into that and come up with some options for us during permitting to review how they can redirect that surface flow towards the street. And if they do so, to make sure that we have some type of BMP and there to kind of slow down the water that's collected. Because again, when we concentrate it, it speeds up velocity again, and then that leads to erosion. And finally is the driveway slope. And while this is a private street, We are concerned about the driveway slope. The existing house has a similar slope. It's all existing in there. But it's at about 15%, and that's pretty steep. And there's quite a bit of front yard to try to reduce that slope. If they can't do it within the vicinity of the whole yard, we would request that at least within, when they get to the apron, they get to as close as 8% as possible. It may be very difficult to get the 8%. We recognize that. But if I can get them somewhere between 10 and 12, that's a lot better than 15. But again, we strongly advise a 15% slope is not a good design. Whether existing or bad, that's pretty significant, especially icy weather or something like that. You really have a pretty steep incline there to work with. Outside of that, Chairman, those are the primary concerns. We have elevations of the building, and again, they more than meet and exceed the design guideline requirements as it talks about massing, roofs, exterior elevations, garage, articulation, materials. And the only issues we found were regarding the grading and the stormwater management, and those are noted as issues that need to be resolved.
Carlos, did you have any discussions with the petitioner about those items?
I did with the developer contractor that's doing the home, and I know he is online. And so Chairman, when you're ready,
Any discussion or any questions right now? No, I think let's go ahead and bring the petitioner up.
All right, Chairman. I have the architect who is the primary applicant. I'm going to promote over. That's going to be Mr. Bileski. And then Mr. Bileski, since you're the applicant, if you can let me know if there's anybody else on your team that you'd want transferred over. I know Mr. Manlin is on and the property owners are on.
Unmute.
You're on mute.
Carlos?
Yes, Jim, I can hear you. You're on mute now, but your video is still out. And then I didn't know if you still had anybody else that you want to transfer.
Well, let me try to handle it right here. I'm trying to get this video going. I'm not sure I know what button to hit though. There we go.
There you go.
All right. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Jim Bileski. I'm the architect. I think what I'd like to do is give you just a little bit of background on what was requested by the Mays here. They came to me wanting to do a ranch house, and in an ideal world, they wanted to save 3 trees on this property. One of them was on the left side of the property behind the driveway turnaround. One of them is in the backyard. It's a 40-inch. And then one of them was in the front yard that we were unable to save. So in an effort to do that, we have the house itself pushed further over to the right-hand side of the site, placing the house some 25 feet off of the southern property line. So, and that's to, like I say, to preserve a tree that's back over there. The other thing that this kind of forced to happen right here, obviously we had to keep the turnaround in front of the tree. And so that more or less sets where the side entry garage is gonna go. One thing I'd like to share, let's talk about this 15% slope, which we are more than happy to work with you, work with the staff on doing anything we can to reduce this. But I will say, we're showing some new proposed contours across there, and you can kind of see how they're spaced. If you look beyond those contours, you can see some existing contours. And what I'm sharing with you here is that they're spaced in a similar manner. So the natural grade is going up this hill is 15%. To reduce that, obviously, we'd have to cut into it a little bit more. We're trying to not disturb more than we have to out here. And as far as the driveway goes, we've got a fair amount of, I know we talked about the front being some 80 feet off of the road. And then I'm showing here where we're cutting across with the driveway to get some run to help that a little bit. But it will be challenging to save the trees and work with this 15% or try to reduce the 15% grade. It's not rocket science, really. The road is down here and the house is up here. One thing I'd like to share about the house elevation is that it falls very nicely between the two neighbors' houses. In fact, where we're proposing the top of the concrete is actually lower than the top of the concrete on the previous house. And the house to the south of us is lower than us, and the house to the north of us is higher than us, and we're kind of right in the middle. So as far as the elevation of the house, we've got it set between the two houses with proper aesthetics in mind. And in order to help this grade thing in the front, we've actually got the garage itself dropped down. We're coming up some 5 or 6 steps to get into the house out of the garage. So what I'm sharing with you here is how some of the placement of the house developed and how we were trying to work it around the existing trees. Let's see, what else can I share with you here? As far as the driveway, the turnaround itself on the south side, I spoke with our civil engineer today, and we feel like we can get that corrected or protected further with a curb and maybe tilt the drive a little bit more towards down the hill. You don't see it on this site plan, but like Carlos was saying, there is something of a natural swale going out to the street between our house here and the one to the south of it, to the left of it. We actually have a pretty good situation here where we're splitting the difference in the backyard, working the water around the right side and the left side. As the water does come around the left side here, which it more or less does that right now. And so our driveway, it drops about 18 inches across there. And we should easily be able to catch that with a curb, or at least if there is, and the only water that's coming down on that turnaround is the vertical water that hits it from the get-go, because the rest of the house water, the downspouts and everything, are taken to the detention water pit in the front yard. So it's not like everything is right there. We are maintaining the existing swale coming down between the houses. Our condition here actually is not any worse than the concrete right on the other side of the property line there. There's actually what I'm looking at, my site plan, which shows a little more right here, and I'm seeing a lot of concrete over there, and it it goes into this same swale. And it actually has similar fall to it coming down across it. The other thing that you don't see right here on the southern property is there is a one-story frame garage, which is actually some 20 feet in front of our garage face. And that's where the swale really starts to form itself and come down between the two properties. So not only are we taking advantage of this swale, but the property to the south of us also take advantage of the same swale. It's just a natural thing that we're going to maintain. We can easily control the water coming down the driveway right there. As far as the brick on the south side, I know that's not a city thing, but we're more than happy to add, well, actually almost 2/3 of the south elevation is already brick around the garage doors. There's a little part of the house to the back that we're perfectly comfortable and actually have it drawn up already, where we'll take well, yeah, you're looking at it right there in that picture. So on the left here where it's dark, that's brick. And where it's a little lighter in the back here with this one window, that's siding. And we can take brick up to the sill of that window, just like we did on the other side. And it should all go together and look nice, I believe. Let's see. We do have some ideas under consideration for to work with Carlos a little bit on that slope in the front, and we'll have to follow up on that.
What are your ideas?
Well, we may have to push the house back a little bit. To be perfectly honest,
Wouldn't that?
which the negative impact there is that we may very well lose the tree on the left. But we're of the opinion we've got plenty of room over there, some 25 feet, that we can plant some new pines and they grow pretty fast. And I think, I've had some conversations with the Mays, and if that's what we have to do. Now, we will want to manage how far we push the house back. It's not like we're just going to shove it an undetermined amount. We are trying to save the trees in the backyard. And so we'll want to be careful there as we do that. Like I say, the positioning of the house as it is has a lot to do with preserving the natural grades and the vegetation around the house. And quite frankly, it fits in the streetscape reasonably well, I think, with where it's at. But I understand what 15% is, and anything we can do to improve that, would be a positive. So it's not an easy fix. Interestingly enough, the house to the right of it, to the north of this house, the driveway going up to it clearly is a 15% slope. It's just the nature of this area down here where the existing grades are fairly steep to get up the hill. It's drivable, it's manageable. It's not like, it's not great, but there's not like a criteria out there that says, hey, we can't exceed this or do this. Like I say, there's the house next door has dealt with it.
Sir, the only question that I have, the house next door, you're right, has dealt with it, but it's doing it on a straight section. where you're doing it is on along a curve where you're almost running across that 15% grade, which I think is a little tricky.
Well, I agree. When my civil engineer put this together, and I'm the architect, I guess I was surprised myself when I didn't see those grades going across the driveway being more perpendicular to the travel area. I have to believe when it's said and done, it's gonna end up being that way because that's how roads are. However, what we're really wanting to be careful about as we do that we don't disrupt the natural flow of the water heading straight down to the street. It is a 15% slope. And naturally, I believe that those contours, well, if you know anything about construction, I have to believe these guys push this dirt around. They get close, but the guy pushing that dirt around and he just makes it look pretty and makes it work. Is the truth of the matter. And I'm sure they'll do a fine job at it. So the differential between the draft here versus the reality, I have to believe there's a little variation going to exist.
But sometimes you're left with, you got the elevation at the street, and you got the elevation at the house. You still got to make the two meet.
Yeah,
So-
that's about all you can do.
Right, but I don't know how everybody else feels, but I'm wondering if we should take a look at what your new idea is for the site plan.
Can you speak up? I'm
wondering if you can do the same thing that we did with the last petition, is divide this up, maybe approve the, or try, vote on the
Community design.
community design, and then look at this, site plan, afterwards.
Yeah,
well, we may have to do that. Yes.
especially you've noted that some of the elevation notations on the site plan are not representative of what's actually going to be constructed. So I think we should try to get that site plan as accurate as possible, simultaneously trying to address some of Carlos's concerns about that grade at the street. I mean, it is what it is, right? But minimizing that as much as possible, and then take a look at that separately.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm especially if we're talking about possibly needing to move the house back. That would
Yes.
change quite a bit. And I'd like to see what that means for all of us. I think that's a big difference.
Well, it is a challenging criteria to address. I mean, it's like I say, if the street is here and your garage is up here and your run is this and everything is fixed, there's only a few things you could do to reduce the percent slope.
Yeah,
And
and we understand that. We're not asking you to break physics. I just think we need to see what your solution is and then look at that in its corporeal form rather than just talking about it ethereally. So if you could come back to us with an actual plan with the house where you think it's got to be to get the grade appropriate and get that percent at the street slope on the driveway as low as possible, and then we'll take a look at it and be reasonable.
I like that idea.
Carlos, do we currently have an elevation that shows the two houses or the three houses?
There is a streetscape provided. That's right here. Is this what you're referring to?
That is, okay.
But again, from a staff perspective, and just make sure it's clear, I mean, we have no issues with their top of foundation and how it's proposed. The issue is ultimately is that driveway slope. Now, that top of foundation does impact that, but that's their design. We want to make sure, that, in the end, it's not that the city approved that design. It's that we brought it to their attention that that's a pretty steep slope, and it needs to, go back, take a look at it, see if there's ways to reduce it. But make sure that it's well articulated, that that's pretty steep.
Well, especially if we're talking about moving the, potentially moving the house.
Yeah, that might be one solution, you know, and there, but again, it behooves them to understand that it's their designers that are putting this together, and that we're making it clear, that's a pretty steep driveway slope, and if they're comfortable with their designers in there and taking that responsibility, I mean, that, again, if they can't find another way, at least city made effort to make sure that it was pointed out, and that's how, you know, that's what they.
Well, I see this being very similar to the last one.
Pardon?
I see this being very similar to the last one,
Correct.
where I think it would be worthwhile. We can go ahead and approve, you know, the community design portion. But then, you know, look at this as a separate item.
Yeah.
To make sure that everything looks appropriately and balanced.
I agree.
Now, I do know that the construction package for the building permit, just the building permit plans, are not going to be reflective of where exactly it is on the lot. So our review process can continue on for the footing foundation and the elevations, and they're pending on the receipt of the site plan. Because even once they complete the site plan, and before they even start construction, they're going to do soils testing and excavations and all that. So there's plenty of time for these things to catch up with one another
Right.
in there without inadvertently impacting one because something got constructed. It's extremely rare if they're quick to turn around a revised site plan that there would be any issues.
So being that we don't have a site plan review on this, is this going to be, this is part of the concept stormwater management plan review?
That is correct. Mhm.
Okay, okay, that's what I thought. Okay, any other further questions from the petitioner?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Go
I
ahead,
did
go
have a question. So if the building does have to move around on the site, is there a chance that the floor plan would need to change? Because I know, you know, you said you'd probably lose the tree, but if you decide, well, we want to keep the tree, maybe in redesigning the building, but we've already approved
That's a good point.
that portion of it, you know, then will we have to go back through and, you know, take another look at that part of it?
That's a good point.
And
Jim, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty unlikely we're gonna redesign the building, the footprint or anything. The trade-off really is the tree. You know, if the trade-off is the tree, we're gonna lose another big tree. By pushing it back maybe 10 feet. But, you know, that might just be a reasonable trade-off. To reduce the slope in the front. To the extent that we can. We also do have existing condition here that, you know, we're probably not gonna get down to 8%.
And so we understand that. Yeah, that's not,
Yeah.
we understand that. Just do the best you can and we'll be reasonable with you.
Well, and that's what we're gonna do, is be reasonable and do the best we can. I mean, the alternatives are, you know, dropping the house and building a moat around the back, but that's like, you know, gets silly, you know. You just gotta, we need more run. And we don't want to create a loopy road in the front to get more run. So the only thing we can really do is push the house back.
Okay,
all right, Jim.
Carlos, any comments from the public?
There were a couple of hands up off and on. So if anybody would like to speak in regards to this petition, and I do have the contractor and then one of the neighboring property owners. So Mr. Manlin, I'm going to promote you to a panelist. I'll let you speak first, as you're part of the application team. And again, if you can state your name and address, and we'd appreciate if you have the opportunity to turn on your video camera as well.
Can you see me?
Yes,
Okay. My name is Mark Manlin. I'm with the Manlin Company, 14 Spady Lane. I want to make sure that I'm clear. There's been some discussions about, quite a few discussions about the grade of the driveway. Are we being directed and is it required that the change be affected where we reduce it? Or are we supposed to look at this as a consideration and do the best that we can? Because I've got concerns. If you look at the grade at the Arbor easement right away, we're at a 630, and then up at the house, it's about 15 feet higher. I'm concerned if you move the house back, I'm not quite sure how dramatic of a change we could have in the slope of the driveway. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what our marching orders are going forward.
Do you mind if I address
No,
that?
I'd be happy.
Yeah, Mr. Malin, there is no mandate that you reduce that number. However, we're hearing from the architect that there's the possibility of reworking things to at least ameliorate it a bit.
I see.
Looking for is let's just do the best we possibly can. The site is what it is, but let's do the best we can to get that slope at the street as low as possible.
Okay.
I will tell you my history. I was in front of this commission years and years ago with an addition to my house where I was trying to save a tree. So I appreciate that, genuinely do. And I'm not advocating that we should just chop down trees to fix the driveway slopes. So if it comes to pass that you think you have to save the tree and you can get the slope a little bit better, maybe that's good enough. Maybe
Okay.
not, but I think you should do the best you can.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
And just correct the elevations on the driveway, how it's gonna actually be, be built.
Okay.
Not exactly, but just to be representative of how you're planning on doing it.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much.
Good. Carlos, next comment?
Chairman, I have two adjacent property owners. I'm going to bring them in order of their hands raised. So Ms. Fahey, I'm going to promote you to a panelist. Should take a second. All right, Ms. Fahey, you should be able to unmute your mic and then also turn on your camera. Please state name and address, and there you go. You got it working.
Charlotte Fahey, number 3 Arbor Road.
Thank you.
Hi, and I'll just introduce myself. I'm Mina Charpu and I'm 8 Arbor Road, but I'm here with Charlotte watching this with her and taking her through it a little bit.
Good. We appreciate it. So if you go ahead.
Is it okay if I speak or do you want Charlotte to speak?
Either one is fine.
Okay, so basically, as Charlotte and I are looking through the plans, one of the questions I have is, and I apologize if it was on the plans. I'm a psychiatrist. I can read people, but I can't read architecture plans, so I apologize. But my question is, where is the HVAC and the generator going to be placed?
Right now Chairman, if I can answer that.
That'd be
because
great.
In the building plans, they are placed in the side yard setback on the south side of the yard. So in the case of these, the plan set, the architectural plans kind of have them along this side of the property. Ms. Fahey's detached garage is right here, and then the house is down this way. And then there's a series of pines that kind of run diagonally along the property, with a majority of that being on the Fahey property. Traditionally, most mechanical equipment is placed in the side yards. I know there was some discussions with the associations about relocating those, and that would be up to the owner and developer and the association to resolve. And if they are relocated to the rear from the city's perspective and from permitting, we have no issues with that. We'll work with them to make sure that is set, but it's traditionally not something normally that we would take a look at. Now, 3 years ago, traditionally, we didn't take a look at driveway slopes either. I mean, these things start to become issues as they're being brought to our attention. So.
Okay, thank you. So basically, that's something that you would encourage us, to discuss with the maze and just to see what options there would be.
Do you have a preference that you'd like to state?
Well, Mrs. Fahey has lived here for many years and, is just worried about noise. And I was wondering if there was a place on the other side. It looked like there was a cove. Again, I'm not able to read these architecture plans that well, but it looked like there might be a little place for it on the northwest side, if I have my north, south, east, and west correct. So I was just curious if that was a possibility in that little indent on the northwest side.
Sometimes that's more dependent on where the mechanical systems are in the basement, but I'll let maybe the architect speak to that.
Well, the little indent on in the northwest corner towards the back of the house, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
I don't think they're gonna want to put it there. Their screened in porch is right there.
Okay. Okay.
But with the north side of the house being pushed over closer to the property line, naturally, it would best be placed on the side of the house where we're 25 feet off of the property line.
Yeah.
Now, as far as noise goes, I mean, we can control noise in a different manner. We can put a little fence around it and some landscaping as well.
Okay.
I mean, everybody's got these things, next to
Of
them.
course.
So
I
that's,
just want to voice, just talk about the concerns, and just see what the options are.
absolutely. I've had conversations with the Mays about this. I think we can minimize the noise, through having a little cedar fence around the thing and then putting some landscape around that.
And then, Mr. Belechski, could you please talk to me about the berm? Where, if I understand, where would that be? Where would that be located?
I saw that too on the site plan here and kind of chuckled a little bit. Proposed berm. It's not much of a proposed berm. I mean, there might be a 12-inch bump
Okay.
right there.
And where would that, I guess, what would be the length of that 12-inch bump? And where would it be?
Well, the civil engineer is not really illustrating that all that well here. What he is illustrating is maintaining the continuity of the swale through there.
Okay.
And so that's what the contours are telling me, is that the swale is being maintained and picked up right there. I don't really see a berm illustrated. And, but if I'm not sure why that note's even there.
Okay.
It's an insignificant note.
Mhm.
I mean, if you want us to build a little berm in there, there's room to do it, throw some dirt over there.
No, I was just curious. I just was curious what the explanation of it was. I have no strong opinion, neither here nor there, whether there's a berm or not. I was just curious where it was going to be and what it was for.
I'll ask my civil engineer.
Okay. I think that was all. I just wanted a little bit of a walkthrough just regarding those two issues. So I thank you very much for that.
Thank you for your comments. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Chairman, and can I note on that, and we appreciate the subdivision comments and being active in this process, but we also have to balance it within what's within the realm of control of the city in there. And we want to encourage these discussions to continue between the association and the homeowners and try to mediate and resolve as much as they can through their indentures. But I have to be cautious about what the city's role is and what we can and can't enforce. Now, this commission does have quite a bit of latitude as a design commission and its roles, and it can disagree with staff in any of my opinions on this matter. But traditionally, this home is going to be further set back from the older home than it was to this neighbor. So they're getting more of a setback than they were before. In addition to that, there has been an issue probably 10, 15 years ago, where I think the house that we're reviewing had put a generator or on outside sauna or whirlpool, and the machinery unit and the close proximity did cause a noise concern to the adjacent neighbor. A matter of fact, what we had to try to get involved, immediate, trying to use whether it was exceeding decibel units or not. Now, this design and being cognizant that is a lot further north, almost double the distance of the old house in there. Now, I didn't recognize the berm notation, but I know that there is a row of pines that are placed diagonally between the detached garage that belongs to the Fahey's to the south, and it runs northwesterly. Now, most of that is within the Fahey's property. It's their berm, it's their pines that are on there, and that provides that screening. If additional screening is necessary, that's great. The one thing about a berm or extending the berm along here is it does two things. Then, it will impact the stormwater drainage. If we try to place a berm to block the garage doors or the mechanical equipment, then that swell we're trying to promote to redirect water to go away from their property is only going to get dammed, and then it's not going to work as we're hoping. So it's one of these things. This wish is better. I think addressing the stormwater issue and avoiding damage to the property than trying to mitigate that noise, and there is good. The other alternatives, and I think the architect had noted, I mean, you could put some screen-in fencing or so. Again, we would discourage it being on the perimeter of the property because we're trying to get a swell to work in between there to help mediate any stormwater issues from that driveway turnaround. So that I don't want to have something, pursue something and then place something in there that negates the benefit of it in there. But we'll work with them again. To the best of my knowledge, there's been discussions between the subdivision and the property owners, and they're going well. And we will, in terms through the permitting, if there needs to be changes after their discussions, try to facilitate those. So they
Very good.
hold up.
Very good. Okay, any other public comments?
Yes. All right. Thank you again, Ms. Fahey and Ms.
Carlos, I just want to say noise has been an issue when they put that hot tub in next door at number 4. And if the architect and designer and everybody can take care of that, so I don't hear constant noise, that would be wonderful.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fahey. All right. Bear with me 1 second, Chairman. All right. Next thing I have Frank Trotter. That might be both Mr. and Mrs. Trotter. Okay, Frank Trotter, I had transferred you to as a panelist. You should be appearing, and if you can unmute, and again, if you can have your video camera accessible, that would be great.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, my name is Carol Trotter. I'm at number 2 Arbor Road, and we're trustees along with Mina, who you had just heard from, who was with Charlotte Fahey. And I just want to say that Mina and Joanna Tashuti, who is at number 6, met with the Mays last weekend, and we all really like the house, and it seems to fit in really well. We weren't really, we didn't really appreciate any water issues because to our knowledge, that property has not had water issues in the past. So we appreciate you looking at that and making sure that the water flow goes in the right direction. Our main concerns were particularly for number 3 Arbor to protect that property from additional noise, because the house for the panel, I don't know if you know, the house has been flipped. the house that has been there ever since its existence for 60+ years, the garage has been on the other side. So the garage and the utilities now have been flipped to the other side, which is a huge deal for the property owner, Charlotte, at number 3. That's neither here nor there. I know that the other point I want to make with this is we really like the fact that the Mays want to preserve the trees. So we'd like to do whatever we can to support that effort. So I just wanted to acknowledge what Mina has said, and that we're on board with the Mays, and our communication is good with them. And we appreciate the attention that you are giving to this, especially in terms of the water issues, because that wasn't on our radar.
Great. Thank you for your comments. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Carlos, any other?
Is there anybody else that would like to speak in regards to this petition application? If you can show your hands, I'll transfer you over. And outside of Ms. Trotter and Ms. Fahey, there had not been any prior. I think that's it, Chairman.
Okay, good. Well, is there any other further discussion on this? Go ahead, Missy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was looking at the email that Ms. Carol Trotter did send to Mr. Trejo, and I saw that she identified 2 of the 3 things that were on this document. And I just want to ask a question, because number 3 on the email says the side elevations do not match the front elevation. And I just want to make sure that's been addressed, and that they, Carol Trotter and those folks, understand that that has been addressed.
That's the reference to the brick.
Okay.
And again, that is not a
Okay.
city's.
All right. I didn't realize that was to the breadth. I thought it was
Correct.
something else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Sorry.
No worries. I appreciate the clarification. So if there's no further discussion, do I hear a motion?
I would love to move to approve the petition for community design only for a new single-family home at number 4 Arbor Road, as presented in the memorandum from the Department of Planning and Community Development dated December 16th, 2021, subject to any staff conditions noted therein.
Motion's been made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been made by Richard Brophy and seconded by Brian Lewis. Carlos, should we please call the vote?
Commissioner Spiegelglass? Approved. Commissioner Rosenberg? Approved. Commissioner Lewis?
Approved.
Commissioner Brophy?
Approved.
Commissioner Rich?
Approved.
Commissioner Wagner?
Yes.
And Chairman Dragell.
Approved.
So the motion for the community design review approval has been approved, has been acted unanimously in there. The site, the concept stormwater management plan is being deferred. And again, our next scheduled meeting is January 6th. We'll reach out to the architect and the developer and coordinate the schedule for those agendas. So,
Good.
all right.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate you being on the Zoom call to answer these questions.
Thank you all too. Good night.
That was the consent business.
Yeah, exactly.
Bear with me 1 second, Chairman, as I get everybody.
Mr. Chairman, do you mind if I raise something? I'm Carlos. I don't know if I'm missing something, but there seems to be in the motion for this next item, the 650 Ashmont, the motion has 73 Stony Side Lane. Is that a?
Yeah, that might be
Typo?
typo in the staff memo.
Okay, I don't mean to call you out. I just want to make sure I'm
No,
missing
yes,
something.
you're correct, and we appreciate it, sir. Uh-oh.
I don't mean to call you out either.
Not wrong unless it was approved.
Right. Right.
You know?
Caught that.
Exactly.
They're not customized reports.
It looks like maybe we have the same architect for this one. Is that how that happened?
Yes, that was for 73. Yes, sir. So that's All right, Chairman, as soon as you're set. I got
Okay.
you.
Good. So
This
we'll
is
move-
a permit for the construction of a new single-family home at the property address of 650 Ashmont Drive. Again, the commission has viewed a similar design to this home in the past and has granted approval. A majority of the front, if not all, is masonry. Staff has reviewed it in accordance to the guidelines. And we find that again, the massing, the roofs, the garage, elevation, articulation are compliant with the spirit and intent of those design guidelines. The only thing that we will bring to the commission's attention, though the commission has approved it in the past, is the two-story entranceway, and it's somewhat like a story and a half. And if you look at this slide, the two adjacent houses on each side have a taller or similar entryway. So we didn't feel that there was anything wrong with that, but we do know that it's been brought up in the past by the commission when this is located in a situation where it's out of character within the streetscape. In this case, we found it compliant or consistent with what was designed. So in terms of the staff review, the outstanding items that we've pointed out in our report is, again, the subdivision approval. We have reached out to one of the trustees, and they're aware of the construction of the new home. Again, this is consistent with what's been approved in the past, but I don't have anything in writing that they've approved it in there. We also noted that there's concerns with the south yard grading, and again, we'll show you it's these slopes. As these houses get wider, the slopes get steeper. When the slopes get steeper, we get more velocity. More velocity leads to erosion. This applies the same thing with the sump pump discharge. This home too, because its topography, is going to have a driveway slope issue that we'd like to see it reduced to as close as 8%. And in this case, this is a public street, and if you drive in front of this home, you'll see where a vehicle bumpers have continuously broken the asphalt in front of the drive, and that's what we're trying to avoid in there, because that is a public fund expenditure that the city's taxpayers become responsible for.
That was a mid-street?
Pardon?
That was a mid-street?
I'm sure it was. The other aspects of this, we would like the petitioner to remove all the honeysuckle in the rear side of the property. And that's because it abuts up to a street. I'll get into that more specifically. And then place a privacy fence, because outdoor, that would be the next thing or any home buyer would probably be looking at. So in this, you do have a site plan review, because the lot is pretty shallow. It's not as deep as a traditional lot. Traditional lots should be 150 feet deep. This lot's only 120 feet. So all of a sudden, again, I have less depth to work on. And given the grades, that's why they have this issue with the driveway, and they'll address that as we go through the discussions. But that being said, too, as you start to disrupt some of the topography, you put the driveway turnaround, the patios and all that. What was the green space that was on the property, it starts to become less and less. And the topography starts to change, and it starts to concentrate the stormwater, which increases velocity, and then it of course causes erosion. So we do have some concerns with the concept stormwater management component or site plan review of this petition, that they need to provide some design consideration to where these wells are starting to get concentrated. Where does the sump pump discharge go? And I think those are noted within the report and have been discussed with the architect. Be glad to answer any specific questions. We have several slides of the petition application. And they're in the last item I think I noted for the commission to discuss was this elevation and its compliance with the guidelines. And I don't think I noted that in the report specifically. I'm hoping I did, but not in the bullet points.
Did you come to any resolution with some of those items when you discussed that with the petitioner?
They were going to talk and get back, and so no, not as of yet.
Good.
I don't think there was any opposition. to that, but they hadn't gotten back to their engineer.
Anybody have any initial thoughts or discussions before we bring on the petitioner? I kind of agree with the south elevation, being a concern. How far, what's the distance between the houses are there?
You have a distance of probably about 32 feet between the two houses. And that's just based on the side yard setback here is 16 and a half. And the adjacent home looks like it's about the same distance.
I think it's 20 feet.
Okay. In addition to the 16.5, just to make sure, okay.
Carlos, the north, do you have the north elevation?
Yes. There you go. That's the garage.
Gotcha. Okay, it's kind of a unique design with the garage spaces kind of separated, right?
Mhm.
Mr. Chairman, is the concern you're expressing with the south elevation regarding the slopes or the actual house itself?
The house itself with the siding,
Yeah.
no windows, no,
I
you know,
agree.
potentially, like if there was a chimney kind of, coming up out of it.
Pretty monolithic.
Yes, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The elevations, I don't know, because it's gonna be a tricky one. Is it truly 15%?
Yeah, I think it's noted in the staff report and the calculations that I provided the numbers.
Because if you look at the adjacent neighbor, according, the picture, on the front of this drawing, it doesn't look that steep. The one on the left definitely looks steep.
Yes.
The one on the right definitely does not look like it's 15%, right?
Well, in the calculation that on there, it was a slope of, excuse me, if I apologize if I said 50%, because they don't provide it in there, but the slope was, that I calculated was 1 to 10. And we're trying to get it to 1 to 8.
Yeah, okay. So it's
So
better
I
than what we
apologize for
had.
the confusion there. And I do have a streetscape picture I can kind of show. Just bear with me. And you can see, I believe you, in front of you, you should have a Google Streetscape picture. And you can see the steps of the sidewalk kind of illustrate the slope conditions of that driveway.
Yeah.
Now, the new driveway will be further to the north.
What percentage do you think that driveway is existing right now?
It's got to be somewhere between 1 to 10, 1 to 12.
Okay.
Pretty close.
Okay, and if there's no further discussion, I'd say let's bring on the petitioner.
Mr. Ivanchek, I'm going to promote you back to panelist. And then is there anybody else that you'd like to bring back for the discussion? Just let me know.
Hello again. Pavel Ivanchuk, architect, 101 South Brent.
Thank you. So I think you've heard Carlos's report, and he had addressed some of those items or talked about the items that he had concerns with. And I think he tried to reach out to you to discuss those. Do you have any comments or any ideas?
Regarding the sump pump discharge, the civil engineer is planning to connect to the roof drain lateral. That's the approach there. Regarding the subdivision approval, I think as Carlos noted, this design has been approved previously. It looks like there was some correspondence, but we can have that written, just a documented version submitted. And regarding the windows on the south elevation, previous designs, we did have windows there, but the owner did not want any windows, given the types of spaces that were there. Some people like wall space for, generally you don't want to look into your neighbor's lot, for example, for the bedrooms. So you want to, and so that's kind of the rationale. I mean, we can, if the commission feels strongly about adding windows, we can, I think we'll do that. Another alternative would be to provide some sort of a design element with some sort of a trim, or etc.
I think we need something that breaks up, that large expanse of siding that's there.
It could be like a horizontal band across to separate the floors. That could be one thing. We could put some smaller windows at, I don't know, what's the, the owner's not here, but
It might be best for you to just to take this back, work on some improvement to this, and then come to us with a new proposal. I don't think we want to workshop it here with you in real time.
Not, especially if the owner's not here,
Right.
to kind of go through that. We don't want to disrupt.
well, actually, the owner would like to start as soon as possible. So I think if you guys are okay with adding windows at the family room on the first floor, maybe 2 smaller windows up above the fireplace and the horizontal band, is that?
I think we need to see what you're proposing. We're sensitive to the fact that the owner wants to start, but we need to see what the actual design is going to look like. And it's difficult, at least from my perspective, for us to imagine it. That's why we have these plans in front of us. So if you could submit revised plans, we can take a look at it the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're talking about a significant redesign, and it's very hard for us to conceive.
And I think on part of that, we need to see the civil engineers where the sump pump's going to be discharged to as well on the plans.
Well, he said he was going to connect it into the roof drain system,
not
but
allowed to-
we're not allowed to do
That
that.
is correct. It's not a.
So that will have to be, changed. Carlos, can you bring up the other slide that had kind of the items, just to make sure we get a chance to talk about some of these? South yard grading. This was more like having the defined swale.
The defined swell, having some type of BMBs, landscape or landscape gardens in there to help. Again, it's that concentration of water and trying to slow down that volume because it is getting concentrated. When you look at the size of the previous rear yard to how this rear yard starts to get less and less.
And then if we could also, discuss or address the honeysuckle issue that the city is requesting to be removed.
Yeah, that's going to be addressed.
Good. And the driveway slope, I think the intent is to try to flatten it out near the street area. So it's not such a steep entrance or egress, out onto the street itself. Is that right, Carlos?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, good. Carlos, we haven't had any discussions about the entryway. That's a little bit bigger and I personally don't have any issues with it. How does everybody else feel?
So
Right, that's my reason for being okay with it. Carol, I'm sorry.
yeah, I don't happen to like the two-story entryways. In this particular case, that we do have other houses nearby that have it, but it is something that I don't like personally. It's also not particularly good environmental design because it costs a lot to heat and cool and light and so on, and you're not getting any real advantage from having to do that. There's no house there, it's just outdoor structure. So it's not a particularly favorable design in my eyes, and I would really like for us to see us revisit that issue seriously, sooner rather than later. In this particular case, however, I don't have a problem with it, given that there's two buildings next to it that already exist in the same form.
I agree. Yeah.
Good. All right. Okay, I'm not sure, Mr. Ivanchek, I think it would be the consensus on our commission to defer this item until you can, send some revisions and address some of those other items that we discussed.
Okay.
Yes, we do need to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we move on, let's just make sure we see if we have any public comments as well to address.
Okay, Chairman, if there is anybody that would like to speak in regards to this petition, please show your raise of hand. It's located in the lower part of your monitor, right in the center. I have 4 people on, 3 I recognize, and they're not associated with this development. So I don't know who the 4th person is. But again, if you want to raise your hand, I think right now it's titled as Liz.
We'll give it about 30 seconds.
And Chairman, I see no hands.
Okay, good. Okay, so I think at this point in time, I think we'll defer this until the next meeting. And if you, Mr. Ivanchek, if you have any questions, if you contact Carlos, that would be great.
Okay.
Carlos, anything else?
That's all I have, sir.
Okay.
January 6th will be our next scheduled meeting, so we'll work with the petitioner to get that coordinated.
Good.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll move on to to item B of new business. Text amendment regarding accessory structures and uses of chapter 400 zoning regulation. Carlos?
Chairman, consistent with our, in our last work session discussion, we've drafted a text amendment for commission consideration. That's going to be on the second page of your report. And just a quick highlight in terms with that change. would do is that the pool footprint would count towards 50% of the total coverage of accessory structures. So we no longer will count the full 100%. 3 communities provide a similar option or do not count it at all. That was Clayton, Creve Coeur, and University City. And that would be the sole change regarding to amendments regarding the how the coverage criteria is set for accessory structures. There was a comment at the last commission meeting of trying to find out what is a typical flat surface or deck area for a pool. And we did do some outreach and then the research on that. There is no requirement. And we actually do have one pool that does not have a hard surface perimeter around it. We're all kind of gauging how long that's going to last in there before they put something up. But that was a design choice of theirs. If one is provided, the rule of thumb that we were told is typically at least 4 feet in surface area around it. But again, it's our understanding that the code though does not require that it has to have one. Just a FYI, there is like an underground wire that goes around the pool, the perimeter of the pool that has to be within a close distance, and that actually grounds the pool from electrocution. And that's really the only item above and beyond just that footprint that's in the criteria. The other things that come into play, of course, is there has to be a fencing perimeter, and that fencing has to have a lock. If it doesn't have a lock, or if you can go out of your patio door into the pool, it has to have an alarm. Those are typical pool requirements. So I hope, somebody did ask that question. I hope that addresses that issue. And the second part of this amendment would again increase the maximum areas for pools that would be allowed or authorized to be reviewed administratively. All of these would still be subject to providing on-site detention as required under Chapter 420. So that wouldn't change. And that the basis for those numbers was based on going and looking at past typical pools and finding how many are on the extreme side, and if they're rare, this will help us kind of facilitate some of these permit processes in there. So be glad to answer any specific questions. Hopefully this is in the direction that the commission was discussing.
Good. Go ahead, Richard. I'm sorry, Carol, go ahead.
Yes, Carlos, I think we've addressed this once before, but I just want to go over it one more time. Where is the definition of what is a pool found?
It is through the ICC regulations, and there's actually a pool and spa code in there, but the pool is defined, what requires a permit and what is subject to this is defined through those.
And does include that our definition of a pool is just going to be the water surface area?
That footprint, yes.
Okay. So we are excluding things like bird baths and fish ponds.
Correct. They would not fall under the same regulations or criteria.
And just a quick question. I think you already addressed it, but just to make crystal clear, we talked about pool surrounds, the 4-foot, concrete pad put around. That is not included in pool footprint, right? It's just the blue water square footage.
Correct.
Okay. I think this is a very sensible approach.
We hope it's blue.
We hope it's blue, brown, yellow.
Well, Carlos, I appreciate it. I think you guys did a good job, and appreciate going through the thoroughness of it all. Is there any other further discussion on this item? Do I hear a motion?
Chairman, again, if there should be an opportunity for public comment. I do believe we have.
Thank you.
And that's
I
Mr.
appreciate it.
Mr. Trainin, if you like, I'm going to promote you to panelist. I know we talked and you were going to address the commission. So. I know his kids had an event and he was going to try to keep tabs on this. So I'm assuming he's there. Mr. Trainin?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Evan Trainin, 724 Cherry Tree Lane. Just again, I have a small lot. I saw another large lot with a large house and a nice large pool with a nice large surround, and their family can enjoy that, where I am, again, hampered or hindered because of my small lot. I do appreciate the 50%. That will help me get my pool and then surrounding deck around it, but I have to now, I guess after last meeting, talking about adding attaching to my house, since my house did not use the full amount for building, that I can add on 500 and something square feet. So to do that now, if I would like to have a patio off my back of my house, I will now have to spend an extra 10 to 15,000 to build a pergola, which will, I guess, circumvent the code that is there, or the rule that is there. I don't want to spend an extra $10,000 to $15,000. I don't think anybody wants to have an additional $10,000 to $15,000 expense added on to an already expensive project. But if this is something I want to do, so I guess I encourage you to, again, look at smaller lots, allow for additional square footage for accessory structures. Talking to Carlos earlier today, he said we still have, we want to preserve green space in Olivet. Well, maybe what you do is you subtract some of the accessory structure from the over 20,000 square foot lots and give it to the smaller square foot lots. Even though it's, as I look at the map there, there's significantly more yellow on this map than there is blue. There's a solution, I guess a somewhat of a solution for the green space. I guess that's all I have to say, but I hope you continue to look at this, because I guess in 2015, when I guess whatever committee was there hastily attached the 10% for the whole Olivet, didn't look into it. You guys are doing a thorough job to make it expand it, which I guess I don't appreciate because it affects me. So thank you very much.
Well, sir, I appreciate your comments, and we haven't stopped on this issue. We are still looking at it. Those were items that we were discussing. We're not asking you to build a pergola, at this point in time, or anything like that. And we are looking at how we're going to address that. But we do have to be careful and cognizant of these smaller lots, because that's where we have lots of concentration of groundwater issues, and make sure that we address it, not just for your specific home, but for the rest of the neighbors and everybody else that lives on that same street that have a smaller size lot.
Mr. Chairman, a quick question for
Go ahead.
Carlos, if you don't mind. Carlos, my understanding is that there are either semi-pervious or permeable stones that can be purchased. Do those count as impermeable square footage for purposes of these calculations?
Yes, right now we don't have an exemption or any discount that's applied to them. Now, there's two ways to look at this. One, again, the commission, when it's reviewing something that is in excess of what staff is authorized to do,
right?
The commission can consider, porous type of pavements as an exchange for offsetting a larger pool system. So, but again, at some point there has to be a cap placed on the commission, and that is at 10%. And because we count that impervious pavement as part of that square footage, it's only exempted from the administrative authority from the staff. So, we do need to look at this more holistically. But at this point, again, this kind of, it's a fair trade-off.
No, it's helpful. I think that we may want to explore that a little bit in more detail, like having a discount for the semi-permeable stones, because my understanding is they work really well and they address the runoff issue to some extent. So maybe that could be a way to help offset some of these issues.
And there was some discussions about the decks, the underneath the decks,
right?
So there are other opportunities we can take a look at.
It doesn't get rid of, right? Exactly.
Right.
It's not one for one. Sure.
Right,
But there's a lot of kind of
how that actually do that and
Or
do it
input decision.
very, very well,
Yeah.
which wasn't there a long time ago.
Yeah, so that's just part of the evolution of this. We can take a look.
Which is the same thing with pervious pavement too. They actually have pervious pavement now that you could put in parking lots as well.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that we should be looking at is if somebody has that, can they do a sidewalk in this? Can they do other things in it to change the situations a little bit?
Absolutely. Good idea. All right, thank you, Mr.
Trainer.
Trainer, appreciate it. Okay, Carlos, any other public comments?
The remaining individuals are Ms. Waters and Ms. Doty.
Okay, any other further discussion on this? Do I hear a motion?
I'll, oh, Carol, please, I've been dominating tonight. Go ahead.
You do such a good job there.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead, Carol.
A motion to recommend approval and forward to the city council an amendment to section 400.1590.b review procedure to limit the site coverage for pools to 50% of the footprint, square footage, and section 400.1592b paren 6 and paren pools to close the area table, to increase the area table maximums. Being part of Article 16, accessory structures of Chapter 400 zoning regulations, Title 9, land use of the Olivet Municipal Code.
Is it Title 9 or Title 4?
Title 4.
Title 4.
Okay.
I will second that motion.
Motion's been made by Carol Wagner and seconded by Richard Brophy. Carlos, will you please call the vote?
Mr. Chairman, bear with me. I'm supposed to have the full coverage. Commissioner Spiegelglass? Approve. Commissioner Rosenberg? Approve. Commissioner Lewis?
approve.
Commissioner Rich?
Approved.
Commissioner Brophy?
Approved.
Commissioner Wagner?
Yes.
And Sherman Jurgel?
Approved.
The motion passes unanimously. This is a recommendation that would be forwarded to the city council. Just Mr. Training is still on. This will be forwarded to the council on January 11th and scheduled for a public hearing on January 25th. I'm sorry.
Good, good.
All right. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, good, good. So we'll move on to it's item C, text amendment, Article 4, land development requirements for Chapter 420, steam buffer protection regulations. Carlos?
Chairman, this was again a matter that we had discussed at our last commission meeting, looking at doing modifications to our stream buffer protection regulations. And the goal here was, again, the Metropolitan Sewer District wants to protect streams, and these are the streams that are identified in the USGS topo maps. In those maps, there are generally two primary types: those that are solid blue line and those that are dashed lines. And Ms. Jody has kind of done an analysis on this. This is going to provide you a sheet that identifies those locations. In all of that, we do not have any solid blue lines in there, but we have several areas where there are these dashed lines in the community. And what we found that a majority of those streams that are identified in the USGS maps are channelized streams or streams that have been outered, and they have gabion wall systems or so. The goal of this original ordinance was to protect the stream banks and try to keep them in a natural setting that's good for the environment, good for sustainability. But when that stream bank no longer exists in its natural state, the ordinance is pretty, I think, over-regulatory. Another aspect of this ordinance is try to ensure that water getting into the streams, whether it's it has an artificial bank or a natural bank, is to be able to filter impurities from the stormwater entering that, and that could be done through a variety of systems. So this text amendment essentially would authorize the commission to provide a waiver if the stream has been artificially modified by means of concrete or a gabion cage wall system. And in doing so, any inlets within that zone of the buffer requirement have to contain some type of BMP standards that will help purify or filter that water. After that buffer, the next thing is that you have a setback added to that. And in that setback, you're supposed to minimize the amount of disruption in there, and you shouldn't have any hard surface areas. This amendment would amend that and allow either a full removal of that if it's unnecessary, or give the commission some latitude in providing some alternatives to that. The other thing we found that under those USGS maps, there are some streams that are identified that don't even exist anymore. And that gets frustrating for us because we're trying to apply a specific standard, and it you know, and some of these are in the industrial park. It just creates red tape and processes that kind of minimize repairing improvements that are already pre-existing. We understand what was there in the past and all that, but the maps just haven't been updated. So that is what this proposed text amendment would do. In the long run, I was talking with Don that we may look at, instead of utilizing the USGS map with Don's expertise, now we have the capability to produce our own maps, and that maybe we adopt a map to reflect the USGS map and establish the standards from the city of Olivet's map as opposed to using this generalized map as a means to do that. And that will take some time in there, but it's something we'll look into and probably minimize a lot of the confusion in there. Now, Don does have some maps.
If you elevate me to panelist,
Yes.
I can share my screen. And I printed out one for everybody tonight, because I was so close.
We'll back them up.
Okay.
Because she knows me.
Thank you.
Now, the other thing I'll note that other communities have made amendments to the application of chapter 420 like we are here doing here. So we're not, again, trying to circumvent any of our role with the Metropolitan Sewer District or so, but we're trying to apply something that's more equitable to our properties, which are shallower. Most of the streams have been either removed or now artificial in terms of their banks. One second here.
Chairman, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
What about the accessory structures in that setback? Can you have an accessory structure in that setback? In the
this-
25 feet?
Well, the streams that I've located, and that so the red line around the blue is that 25-foot. So there are plenty of structures, whole houses and accessory structures all over.
All over that, okay.
Yeah. So it would be something that we would have to see how we would retroactively apply it to properties that exist. I don't think that can.
And that was the problem because there's two components to this ordinance. There's a buffer and a setback. Within the buffer, they didn't want you to put anything. And that includes an accessory structure.
And is there any existing now in
Oh,
that
yeah,
buffer?
there's a whole bunch.
A whole bunch, okay.
But a lot of
And
those
then in
already
addition
have,
to that, you had to put a setback. And I think that maybe that's what you're gonna allude to, Chairman, is that most of these, that stream that they're protecting is an artificial channel. I mean, it's a channelized channel now. You know, so there is really no stream bank anymore, which I can understand why that buffer would have been applied. And it might work well in Wildwood or Chesterfield, way out there. But if the stream bank's been already altered, what are we protecting? Our goal would be then to make sure that the water going into the channel is at least not, you know, full of mud or debris and things like that. And that's what that second component was. But yeah, right now this is a hindrance to a lot of properties. And what they've done is they've gone to the Board of Zoning Adjustment to try to get around that. And the board's worked with them in many cases under the auspice that, you know, that there's really not a natural bank that exists.
is it, you know, we talked about trying to separate this between, you know, natural banks versus man-made banks, you know, and is that still something to
That's
think
what
about?
that's what this would do. It would, if the bank is unnatural, the commission would have the authority to waive the buffer requirement, but still require the setback and ensure that anything feeding into that bank is filtered or provided with some type of BMP to filter out impurities.
Right, that makes sense.
Okay.
How many of these, how much is natural, you know?
I
mean, I know 2 spots, I feel like.
Well, because we've had conflicting sources, USGS, or at least what I've gotten from the water flow lines, I can't actually find. I mean, there are categories for a lot of these things, but I can't verify unilaterally that they all exist.
Right.
Because we've have physical evidence of, that we've observed that they don't exist, so I don't trust the data source at this point to utilize what categories it's provided.
Makes sense. I get it.
Sorry, that's a very long way of saying. Don't know.
When we looked at this, what's changed in this text amendment from the last time we looked at this?
The changes were to ensure that any inlets or systems that divert the above ground stormwater directly into the channel, that they require some type of BMP to purify if there is one
Very good.
itself. And then that in cases where the channel is no longer visible, that there'd be no setback required. And we'll show you two examples. I don't know if you can, but you can show the one on Bond Hills where it does the loop, and then in the industrial park where there's nothing.
On Bond.
That's the one that has that little loop drop. No, your mouse hand.
Oh, right, okay, so Bond Hills where the street label kind of covers up that little lip. That's what he's referring to.
That's one in which in the back, there is now a concrete channel. But I guess the old stream used to come out and go towards where the street was before it all through. That's what's on the USGS map. It just poses problems when we're trying to enforce the code. And then the other is the industrial park, where that fork that goes southwest, and this includes our city hall grounds.
Oh, here.
That stream doesn't exist at all.
Wow.
There is a lot of, I don't want to say acknowledgement on the behalf of USGS that these are not entirely factual. It's compiled data, historical data that they have, over surveys, and there are limits to the studies. And I feel like they're going about it in a geographic, crowdsource way to try to build their data. Hopefully it'll get better over time. However, creating our own maps and developing our own database cannot hurt us whatsoever. We can also contribute our definitions to USGS. Kind of simultaneously as I was researching this, I found out how to edit their things. So I was like, if we have issues, because I was like, I heard 2 things, when we started talking about it, I was like, we don't believe these are accurate. And we don't really know where they are. So.
Carlos, is there anything like about, with any of these artificially modified banks or whatever, if they start falling in disrepair and they start falling over, do we want to state somewhere that these, we're saying if they have those, then it doesn't apply. But say something like, as long as it's in proper working order, or, something like that.
concern would be that we don't shoulder the responsibility for the maintenance of some of these streams to the property owners, it's part of the MSP system.
Right.
And so it's something we have to bring to MSP's attention, that there was a crack in concrete beam that kind of runs under ice. I would be concerned that to pursue the property owner for maintenance, it's there and it's on a private property easement, but I don't believe that they own that as part of MSP's panel
Right.
system.
Right.
And that if it was damaged or deteriorated for some reason, that we would, MSP would do the repair.
No, I get that, but we wouldn't, if it was in disrepair, the wall's fallen down and it's not really working the way it's supposed to, we wouldn't want them to be allowed to build in that area.
Correct. But that would be like, I would think would it be a temporary situation? So MSP, would they be
Yeah.
restricted from doing any improvements because MSP hasn't maintained their?
Good point.
I'm not sure. I'm not saying that it's something we should be cognizant of. But I'm not sure how that would work.
Might be just overthinking.
Yeah, I would, I don't think we should hold back a homeowner because MSD is slow to repair their work. I mean,
I get it.
and that happens, I can tell you right now. So,
I agree.
yeah.
I'm just throwing it
Yeah,
out there.
no.
Sure. Go ahead, Carol.
Oh, I just wanted to comment from a land use perspective. I think it's fascinating how the northern portion of our city was so deeply impacted by the path of the river. I had never realized that some of those property configurations and where the park was, as well as the industrial parks, were all influenced and chosen because that was where the river was going.
Yeah.
Whether or not it actually shows up there today.
Yeah, it is very interesting.
Very telling.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? With this map and with the identification, they're saying some of the things are really not around anymore. A couple years ago, we had the conversation of floodplains and people concerned about the mapping and then the cost of insurance because then they're identified in a floodplain area and they have to pay higher insurance. Identifying these and then saying some of them really aren't around anymore. Does this impact any homes that here right now are actually paying floodplain insurance that maybe should not if things have been updated or get updated?
That would be a different issue, like the formation. So in the majority of these streams, all of that, before they got into our jurisdiction, the actual engineering studies stopped. And what they did, where they stopped, and a good example is, let's say,
I remember that
on
conversation.
Gilman and the section of the river repair, we know it continues on. And what they've done is that they stopped the 100-year floodplain at Gilman, and that goes eastward. But as you go westward towards the Indian Meadows and on to Worcester Farm, it is a 500-year floodplain that's not subject to regulation. Now, it does note, like, we haven't done any studies on this, and it would take 500 years. You're kind of on your own to make sure.
I'll also say that these flow lines don't coincide with the 500 or 100-year floodplains entirely. They're not really in the same locations. So.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? Is there a motion on this one? or-
You gotta ask for public again.
Yes, it'll be on page 1. Cover your report.
Just trying to move this along.
And there are no other comments.
Okay.
That's great.
So do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Carol.
I'd like to motion to recommend approval and forward to City Council an amendment to section 420.0 060, land development requirements regarding the undisturbed natural buffer and the additional setback being part of Article 4, land development requirements of Chapter 420, steam buffer protection regulations, Title 4, land use of the Olivet Municipal Code.
Motion's been made. Do I hear a second?
I will second that motion.
Motion's been made by Carol Wagner, second by Richard Brookie. Carlos, will you please call the vote?
Approve.
Approved.
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 Approved. And the motion passes unanimously. Recommendation for the city council for first reading on January 11th of 2022. And a public hearing on January 25th.
Other business, item 6.
Outside of that, we don't have any meeting minutes given the time. And there we'll have those. And of course, our next scheduled meeting will be for 2022. That'll be on January 6th. Hopefully we'll have the two deferrals. Oh,
We
I
have
do.
3, 2.5, actually. We have 2.5. Don't you 2.5 deferrals, don't you?
Yes, we'll follow through and make sure we got all that information, coordinate with the submission. For the January 20th meeting, which would be our, I believe, our second, third Thursday of the month, we do have one new home for the Birdie Lane subdivision that is in, and it's probably a full proposal. Hollow, they're working through some of the construction issues. And I can't recall if there's anything else. Some development updates. Just there's a lot of activity. It's an exciting time. And again, it's both public and private investment. If you've been out by, well, first let's talk about our community center. And these were the schedules that were provided, a couple of years back of implementing the park improvements in the community center. You can see we're well past the halfway mark on getting those, and you can see that they're looking at 2023. Hopefully for majority of it. The pictures below kind of show the work going on for the community center down by Warson Park, and then also for the extension of the Centennial Trail that's also up there on Warson Park. That's moving along. It's pretty exciting to see all that activity. Old Bottom School, it's pretty amazing, especially with the last week's storms and the tornadoes. These emergency shelters, and they're installing one as part of the school project. It's just very impressive on the mass and size of this thing. Been quite a bit of work. On the other side, I know they have the skeletal frame already being set up for the addition in the back. This kind of shows the retaining wall right along the northern part, and then of course the addition by the library. Another one I thought just out of interest was up at Olive Crossing, and again, we had talked regarding that wood soldier, we call it a soldier force wall, and the activity going on. This is the back end of it, and you can see the rock in there, and all that the drainage is being handled, and then the spatial distance, and then the arms fencing. And then a little further back is the actual property line. So things are moving there pretty good. It's a pretty impressive wall in there. It's been a pretty neat design on that system. I got a photo of that along here. And overall, you can see the pretty well height and depth and how much that residential building does fall below grade. And of course, there's an additional setback from the building doesn't just go up to that wall. It's still further to the left of this picture in there. Somewhere back here, I think you can see Mount View City. In there. So, but we are doing there is some dirt storage that's occurring there that's behind where the old Office Max used to be, and that is while they're regrading and setting the site. So we, similar to them, we did get some calls and concerns about the elevations being changed but that is because they're doing some moving the dirt around and all that. And then we got a pretty impressive, panoramic view of all that grading, how it's occurred. So on the right-hand side is I-170, the left-hand side would be Price. 14 acres starting to look pretty impressive. And then the picture below is the detention pond that's going to be by 170. And ultimately, that is a bio retention pond. It will have like a step retaining walls in there with some decorative block around the side. And then on the interior side, and you can see where this inlet is, right about here will be where that public plaza will be along the corner. So things are moving around along. We've received the building permit for the residential unit. Our staff is doing that review right now. Opus Group has closed on all 23 properties. That whole area is now under their ownership. It has been fenced and closed. We've been trying to work with them along with the police department, fire department, to ensure security and things kind of move along. They are trying to move in a quick schedule. Right now, they're doing the environmental assessments and all that. And there are some requirements that you have to wait a period after some testing. But we're hoping that by mid-January, we'll start on some of the demolition. All utilities are pretty well disconnected. Gas, water were the first ones that we did. Then we did the electrical. We did the electrical for the purpose to ensure that somebody doesn't go in and try to charge a phone or plug up a heater. And we're also trying to work with them of trying to get rid of all the doors, just making us much inhospitable for the next couple of weeks. We did talk about the lights in there because we do have a security camera from a public works building point going through. And at this point, I don't have an answer whether they're going to do that or not yet, based on their discussions. So we did take the argument. I want to make sure you're aware that we did bring that issue to their attention. And their Haven looks great. We talked with them, trying to get an idea of where they are with the tenant. The Oliver has its own website set up, and they're already advertising their unit, and we'll be having some type of display up within the next couple of months. Firestone, there continues to move in on that one. We've been going back and forth trying to make sure we get set in place. The weather's been the culprit along with some. They're aware of that. Birdie Lane, the street is in. Get a chance to drive down the bottom. It's pretty impressive. They're still working on the utilities. The last thing, and I think tomorrow they start the connection to the water main, and there'll be some disruptions there. We've authorized some early morning construction starts so they can try to minimize that and get that done. To where it's not as much. We want to make sure that we get them out of Old Bottom Road because if we get winter events that they're not plowing and there's that metal plate. They're moving along on that. And then easy storage, I'll let the council liaison talk about that. But the council did approve chapter 100 bonds for them. So their next step is after financial arrangements are put in place to apply for the building permits, and we hope for a spring construction. And I think I covered all the spots on this meeting.
All right, thank you very much. And to continue on the easy storage conversation, yes, we did agree to some chapter 100 incentives for them. I want to explain to the public, chapter 100, when we deal with sales tax savings on the equipment that they use for, the materials they use for construction. I always have to remind people that we don't have a hardware store in our community. So that particular incentive is not impactful to us, nor does it hurt us. It's sales tax on the construction materials that they obtain elsewhere and bring their construction to the city. So chapter 100 and the fact that it's on the north side and it meets the opportunity zone capacities of what's available, it's a win-win. But I do want to indicate, because I did ask the gentleman to be specific. We did, when we negotiate, the city's mindful of our sisters and the school districts and the community colleges and things of that nature. And with this particular project, we did negotiate with regard to pilots. And that is that, the school district will get percentage of theirs. The city of Olivet will get a small, percentage of ours. And so that is, with what you saw earlier, Tim, that is a part of working together with a public partnership and a public-private partnership. So that's where we were mindful to say, we don't really want to hurt, these other taxing entities. But here's where we want to negotiate. So that's what that was about. And it does lead to embracing and hugging and agreeable opportunities between cities and other taxing districts. So that's where that's at. Next, I'm going to talk about briefly is the comprehensive plan. You guys are going to be busy again. Yeah, it's 2004, 2006. We're now at 2021. We're 15 years later, since we adopted, and we've done really, really good with our land plan. We didn't put it up on the shelf like all the other ones. You guys have been amazing. The city's been amazing. And we're going to get back to looking at that again, because we've done a great job with what we created, and God bless you all for that. I am excited. The election. There will be an election, ladies and gentlemen. There will not be a need to campaign. There were only two people that filed. It was myself and it was Rick Knox. Right. So it's a pleasure to work with Rick. He's come aboard. It's a little different for me. I got to quit calling him chief. I remember it's Rick, and kind of like have a different kind of interaction with him because he's not an employee, he's a council member. With the city staff and city council, really want to wish you guys a happy holiday. Again, it's been great achievements this year. We are extremely grateful and excited. And I know things that you don't know that will be coming forward. And I am looking forward to what you're going to see in the coming year, 2022. Thank you all very, very much. Happy, healthy holidays and a happy, healthy new year.
Very well said. And I think everybody here thinks the same thing with, for everybody else that's here too, and anybody else who's in attendance. So thank you. And if there's not any other comments, we'll close the meeting. Good, good.
Show you some of the work that on our behalf. Remember, Jonathan was here and really helped set the foundation for it, but we never got to the point of purchasing the software, putting it together. Don is taking that realm up, and it's moving quickly. And this is one of the items put together kind of quickly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is what I do. So this is just a simple app. It's actually going to be so that we can add our private developments and park renovations and showcase all of these items off simultaneously. I'm really excited to get like the MSD and the street projects in. It's also very easy entry for our staff members. So we can have multiple people. It's not just me that has this, little fiefdom. I want everybody to play with it.
This looks great. This looks really neat.
That again goes to the council goal about being transparent.
And this is definitely more of a, a public interaction piece, something for our website. Of course, it's just in the infant stages at the moment, and there's a lot more that we can do with this technology. This is literally and in the description, it says it's the easiest access app that I have. So, because that's, I'm trying to think of it from multiple directions, but And if there's things that we can contribute, any kind of information, data, if there's stuff going on, I only see, new things for this. There's a lot of ways to go.
Very exciting. Very cool. Yeah. Any other Easter eggs or surprises? All right. So we'll close this meeting at 9:42. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.